Good afternoon. Welcome to the Leadership Winston-Salem September Leaders Are Lunch webinar, Artificial Intelligence Tools for Everyday Use. My name is Frida Mitchell, and I am the Alumni Engagement Director for Leadership Winston-Salem. For those of you who may be less familiar with LWS, we are a nonprofit organization that works with over 100 community leaders each year to educate, connect, and energize them to serve and improve the community. Hosting webinars like this is just one of the ways that we continue to educate our class members and stay connected to our alumni. At this time, I would like to introduce our moderator for our conversation today, Ms. Claudia Barrett. Claudia is the CEO of Inference Cares. She is also chair of the LWS Alumni Council Educator Committee and alum of the LWS flagship class of 2022, the best class ever. Claudia?
Thank you so much, Frida. It is my pleasure today to moderate this webinar and introduce our speakers. So first, our first speaker for the day is Joe Parrish. He is partner and chief creative officer at The Variable, which has been at the forefront of merging creativity with technological innovation. With over 2 decades of experience, Joe has spearheaded the transformation of The Variable's capabilities, focusing on leveraging AI to solve complex business problems and uncover new opportunities. A recognized industry leader, Joe co-founded The Variable in 2011, driving the agency to success with his unique blend of creative vision and deep understanding of AI's potential. Joe, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen, and then I'm going to give the obligatory, can everybody see my screen? Okay, so I spend a lot of my time now actually traveling and presenting about AI, and my presentations usually range anywhere from an hour to 4 hours. So I'm tried to cut down a little bit, but I'm going to be burning through some things. So a little bit about us. The highlight of this is we've recently won work from Tesla and Liquid Death, which are 2 of the most admired brands in the world right now. And everybody says, hey, no offense, but why are these brands working with an agency in Winston-Salem? And one of the reasons why we won this business is because our deep understanding of AI and AI workflows. So when do I use AI? I start with the assumption that AI can solve any problem that I have, and I let it prove me wrong. You will be better off for having gone down the AI rabbit hole and worked with AI to figure out a solution than if you hadn't started there in the beginning. But the reality is you need 10 hours with any AI tool before you're any good. And this is frustrating. AI, and I'm talking specifically about large language models, they have a high bounce rate right now. People go to them, they hear the hype, they type in, write a poem about how funny my child is, and it's not great. And they say, oh, AI is overhyped. So I'm going to tell you in this presentation a little bit about how you can get over the bounce rate, but ultimately you do have to commit to 10 hours. There are a bajillion AI tools and more popping up every day. Which one should you use? This is the suite of tools that The Variable uses. For the large language models, we use Claude, Gemini, and ChatGPT. Claude's my favorite. For audio, we use all of these things. I'll show you an example of video. For video, we use Runway, Images, Midjourney, and Ideogram, and then research, we use Perplexity and Consensus. So if I was to go through the tools, I would try to use ChatGPT 4.0. It's a really good multi-use model. You'll get great stuff out of it. But right now, my favorite by far is Claude. And if for $20 a month, you get access to Claude 3.5 Sonnet. And as I'm still playing around with it, I'm amazed every day at things that it is able to do. This as an example, I asked it to invent and develop a musical playable game, code it in real time in HTML5, give me the instructions and let me play. And it did it, which is just mind blowing. And then I use Perplexity a lot for research. And then there's a new tool that I'm going to play the audio of.
It's how they take that catchy tagline, build, learn, inspire, and actually like translate it into action. Their mission statement, right?
Right.
It's not just some vague aspiration. It's like they lay it out, educating, connecting, and energizing leaders to serve and improve the community.
You're right. It's all about the action verbs, not just being a leader, but doing.
Yes.
Doing something to make a difference. And the fact that they've been around since 1984.
So that sounds like a podcast, but it is not. All you do, Google has a tool called Notebook ML, and you can upload. All I did was gave it this information from Perplexity, and it created a podcast, a conversation of two people talking to each other, and it's 10 minutes long, and it was fascinating, and it told me all I ever needed to know about leadership Winston-Salem. But Perplexity is a great research tool. Everyone thinks they're going to take down Google. We hear a lot about how large language models hallucinate. Perplexity tries to curb that by citing its sources. So it will go out there, it will do the research, it will cite where it's getting its sources. And the great thing about this is now I have all of this data. The LLM now knows all of this data, so I can actually talk to the data. Like, tell me how I can be more involved in leadership Winston-Salem, or whatever that next question would be. It all still comes down to the power of the prompt. I think this is going to change over time, but right now it's super important. This is the framework that I like to teach. It's called RTEF, and it stands for Role Task Example Format. And the reason why there's an image of a teeny tiny little piano here is because a large language model has access to all the information in the history of the internet. And that's too much information. So what we need to do is constrain it. You think about, there are a lot of artists that think that great creativity comes from constraint. So we need to constrain the parameters of the large language model. So give it a role. You are a volunteer at Leadership Winston-Salem. Give me a task. Help me think of 10 ways that I can improve Winston-Salem. An example, it could be, how do I curb racial disparity? How do I start to tackle food scarcity? Whatever that is, give it the examples and then the format. Generate a PowerPoint presentation with your top 10 recommendations, however that format is. And then I'll show you how that kind of comes to life in a sample prompt. So this is a prompt that I gave, and this was a long time ago. This was, early LLMs. They weren't great. But the role, I said, you were a seasoned screenwriter. The task, I said, you've been tasked with coming up with the next great American TV series. The examples, I said, you could write a sitcom about an advertising executive who creates a religion, or a pastor who goes into advertising, or anything else that sounds funny. And then the format, give me the title of the sitcom and the log line for the series. The other thing about this, your expertise is always going to matter. So I've messed around with screenplays enough to know that a log line is how they describe shows in Hollywood. And that expertise lets the LLM know the format. So it just helps me get a better result. And what it came up with was amazing. It came up with this show called Sacred Slogans. The log line says, in Sacred Slogans, a gifted ad executive aiming to revitalize his career teams up with a struggling church to boost its attendance. In a bid to save his career in the church, he embarks on a hilarious and heartwarming journey to merge the worlds of faith and branding. They launch a series of unconventional campaigns that turn religious outreach into a viral sensation. As they navigate the fine line between reverence and ridicule, they discover that faith, much like advertising, is all about finding the right message for those who need it most. That is unbelievable. 10 out of 10. I would watch that show. My wife and I are always trying to find these shows on Netflix. This would be top of the queue. So it is a really good idea, but it came from a really thoughtful prompt. So role task example format is the prompting structure that I would recommend. There's another tool called Udio, and this is it's a song generation tool. I can explain how some AI tools work. This is magic. It is literally Harry Potter. I can't explain it, but listen to this song. I gave it a prompt to create an 80s hair metal song about leadership Winston-Salem. And all of these images, by the way, are AI generated. So this was generated in Midjourney. I asked for the album art for a band called Leadership Winston-Salem. But listen to this song. It's crazy.
In the city streets where dreams unfold, the leaders rise with hearts of gold. Guided by the wisdom shout, the future bright, a vision, yeah. Leadership Winston-Salem, hear the call. Together we rise, we stand tall someday. Winston-Salem, we pave the way, shaping the leaders of today.
So what I tell everybody right now, no matter what your job is, if you're looking for an icebreaker, if you need to go sell something, if you've got an interview or whatever that is, write a song about it. It's the greatest icebreaker about all time. People cannot believe that you're capable of doing that. Quickly, I'm going to go through an idea that, and I don't know that I'm going to be able to get to it, but so Haynes was a company in our backyard. They were struggling a little bit. So in another workshop that I had, a company was looking for apparel ideas. AI came up with this concept of unisex and gender fluid denim, which I thought was a really interesting and compelling idea. But then as I started to think more about it, boy, wouldn't that make sense for a company like Haynes, who just makes all the practical clothes, to come up with unisex and gender fluid items. So there is no male or female label. I asked it to give it a name and a tagline. It used an anagram of Haynes and turned it into Shane and this tagline, where everybody fits. That's a great tagline. That's a great name. And then it generated a bunch of imagery around what this clothing line could look like. It then did, and this is all, through good prompting and work, but it also created a photo shoot of what that line of clothing could look like. And then to give you a flavor for where the world is going, I created a little video and wrote another song about Shane, and I will end on this.
And all they wanna wear is, all they wanna wear is, all they wanna wear is the style of Shane. It's fucking insane. The style of Shane.
All right, that's my time. Thanks so much.
Wow, Joe, that was just mind blowing. I'm looking forward to checking out some of those links that are those tools that you recommended. So now we will be moving on to our second speaker. Konrad J. Walsh serves as the Dean of Public Safety Technologies at Forsyth Technical Community College. He began his public safety career as a volunteer firefighter in the 1990s. While working as a reserve emergency medical technician with Forsyth County. In 2019, he retired from the Winston-Salem Fire Department as a division fire chief. Throughout his public safety career, a top passion centered on finding and training future workforce, which included looking for new and innovative ways to improve training methods. That passion would ensure all our present and future first responders receive the best education possible. He is a 2018 Leadership Winston-Salem alum, which greatly helped to further shape his understanding of our community challenges. He is a graduate of Western Carolina University Master of Project Management program, which aids Konrad, or Jay, as we call him, in his process improvement initiatives. Welcome, Jay.
Well, thank you so much, Claudia, for that introduction, and good afternoon, everybody. So being part of leadership in Winston-Salem in 2018 did help shape a lot of things for our community. And I think sometimes, especially in the public safety realm, it's really, we only see snippets of the community depending on where you respond, depending on if you're law enforcement, fire, EMS. So leadership did transform a lot for me in leadership Winston-Salem. So I wanted to do that plug there because I feel like it would be a very good thing for everybody to get into. So thank you again. My presentation will be slightly a little bit different. So in education, as I moved into this a few years ago, AI has definitely taken hold. And as Joe mentioned earlier, things like ChatGPT and others, there's a lot of educational pieces now here at Forsyth Tech. We are constantly evolving to make sure that we are keeping up with students and keeping up with what AI generates and how students and faculty and staff are using those. Specifically today, I'm going to talk about in the public safety realm, there is a piece of training that we use that is VR generated. And I know a lot of times people look at VR differently and AI, but the VR systems have gotten very complicated now, and they're very complex and use a lot of AI embedded and generated pieces to help our first responders and healthcare workers overall get a lot of better training. Because public safety training is constantly evolving, and we're trying to give those real world experiences and situations that you have those confines and challenges of a classroom. There's a lot of things that you just cannot do inside of a classroom in the public safety realm, and the VR, and specifically these newer VR systems with a lot of AI generated pieces, make a huge difference. Recently, I sat down with our basic law enforcement training school director and asked him, I said, what is one of the biggest challenges that's facing law enforcement today? And this is really not just law enforcement, it's all emergency services. And he said, talking to people. It is de-escalation. And I think all of us, if we think back over the years, things that's happened, you've seen it in the media, training officers, training pretty much anybody to be able to get in those complex situations and be able to talk and try to de-escalate something that becomes a very high pressure situation. You know, we're not all equipped to basically be able to walk up into a random situation with somebody who might have a mental health crisis. It could be a number of things. And one of those pieces, it's really difficult to kind of think through that on the fly. So unfortunately, when we don't train our first responders to be able to respond to those quickly, unintentionally things can escalate. So one of the systems that we use to train is an AI embedded VR system called Apex Officer, and it's helping to equip law enforcement officers and others with the tools necessary to turn like those high stress situations into very low stress environments. And I think all of us can appreciate the fact that when we get things to slow down, we learn to talk to people, it's going to make everything a lot better, and it's going to de-escalate things. And in the classroom setting, that's almost impossible to do when you think about all the different variations that you could interact on at any given day. And I'm going to share my screen and show just a few slides to kind of show what we're talking about and what we're looking at and why. Some of these systems are very proprietary, so I don't have a lot of very specific video of that. So in the Apex Officer system, the system is primarily, it's mobile. We can take it just about anywhere we want to go. And on the screen, you'll be able to see kind of just a very basic setup. When I say it's ultra realistic, when you're inside the immersion piece of the VR system, as it's AI generated pieces in there, I could walk up behind you, somebody could be in the room talking to you, you will never know. It is ultra realistic to the fact where we've had law enforcement officers almost lose themselves inside this piece where they start interacting real world with assailants or mental health crisis and kind of forget that they're actually in a VR world. And that's really what we're trying to do, is to train those necessarily pieces for that de-escalation part. So on the screen, where the AI piece really comes into play and helps tremendously, as you're setting up this scenario, for lack of better words, the things that we cannot do in a classroom is come up with an infinite amount of areas that typically in a classroom we can do one or two, so maybe three scenarios, but we can't change out everything very quickly. If you look at the template here, when we build this out, we ask the system to build. So AI is coming in and we say we're trying to get a mental illness situation. We need it to be in a hospital setting. We need to be in a library. We can change the character. We can change languages. We can change gender. We can pretty much ask it to do pretty much what we want it to do to put that particular officer in any situation. And as they step into that situation, the nice part about the new systems, and it helps train the officers and trains others, is that it learns as it goes through. As an officer or anybody that's interacting with the system moves through, unlike a video game where it already has a predicted end. I mean, so if somebody's coming in and watching that and training with you on it, and they get into a very similar situation, it's going to be different. It's going to understand that the goal basically is the de-escalation part. It's the pieces in there. So it's not necessarily always going to have the same outcome, and it can constantly learns a lot of the pieces, those natural interactions that the system is picking up from you as those inputs are basically going in. And this has been game changing in law enforcement and other areas, as you can kind of see as you start to pick through some of the basic templates, but it can get far more advanced in that part there. And part of that, basically, those realistic environments, that interaction is going to change the outcomes of so many of our interactions that law enforcement has with others, because you're learning, as my school director said, you're learning how to talk to people. You're getting direct feedback from there. An operator in a room can be wearing a headset and they can interact with you. So as you're asking questions, they can answer back. They could throw you off the trail. They can do different things in there along with the actual system as it generates. So there's double pieces that you can put into place. And that's very much needed with you start thinking about, and I'm going to use the example that we constantly see is a vehicle stop. So we've had some officers come in, they get into this VR system, they sit in a chair, they're sitting down. It's really interesting to watch how it unfolds. And they pull somebody over, and the interaction can change, whether the person has, whether they're intoxicated, whether they're aggressive, whether they're mental illness, and walk up and literally feel like you're walking up to any car on the street and change those pieces on there. So it is a game changer for law enforcement. It is something that we use at Forsyth Tech and other agencies across the world to try to do those pieces on there. It's going to be something that I feel that most of your law enforcement training programs are going to have to incorporate sometime in the very near future to make sure that they're training people at a level that is consistent with what citizens really feel like should happen. So another area that we really get into outside of law enforcement is healthcare, specifically emergency medical services and clinical settings. They're very difficult to replicate in real time. Again, the confines of a classroom and logistics make it nearly impossible to train workers to deal with such stressful situations that evolve minute by minute. And a lot of times those decisions you're having to make, they are, well, they're life and death. And so part of that is with an AI embedded system like we use, which is VR Patients, can now place students in limitless situations that allow them to gain valuable experience and proper decision making for care and instantly see the results. The great thing about this is the decisions that they make, if they get that wrong, the scenario can be rerun and allow a student, to kind of perfect that care. And if you see on the screen, the realistic environments that it puts you in, their hand movements, as you can see, the gentleman on the right-hand side, he is in the VR system. You see the patient really in the bed necessarily there as they're drawing up medications. The piece of it is you can be replicated over and over and over again. And the nice part about that is that's almost nearly impossible to do in a classroom setting when time management, resources, and those things are not necessarily always going to be there. And in the VR environment, again, kind of like the Apex officer, the nice part about that is you can really work through the problem as AI starts to change, as you are doing interactions, whether you're giving them a specific drug, whether you're doing a specific procedure, it's reacting to that. It's giving you feedback, direct feedback on what you're necessarily doing, and allows you to learn, but also to make sure that you're doing things that are consistent with, national care trends. And part of the really neat thing about the way VR and AI has come to really play a part in emergency services is a lot of your national accrediting agencies allow you to do certain things in the VR environment that typically in the past you would have to be in a classroom and have somebody sitting there and have an evaluator necessarily do. You can download that information, and with that downloaded information, be able to be graded off of that. And that piece right there alone is very helpful for us at Forsyth Tech and other areas to be able to take a entry-level student, bring them through, learn a little bit about patient care, and perfect their skills all the way out to a point that when they go for accreditation or state testing, they've been able to actually put their hands, for lack of better words, in a virtual environment with patients that they are going to see in the real world, but also at the same time that they're going to be doing when they take national testing, like they have something called their technical scope of practices or their TSOPs you might hear on the EMS side. But this can be done over and over again. So not only student success, but also when they come out and they start working with us as citizens, their level of care is heightened by, I mean, tremendously much better than you would have in the past. So I want to stop sharing my screen for just a minute. And again, because a lot of the things that you do in the VR world, it's very, very hard to see. So again, if anybody was ever interested in witnessing or checking on some of our VR systems, we do tours all the time and give an opportunity for other agencies to come out and witness those pieces there. So again, thank you very much for allowing me to kind of discuss the VR AI piece for training. So much appreciated, and thank you for your time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jay. That was really, really interesting, and what a great educational tool for our law enforcement and first responders. And I will say that I have toured, and very impressive what you're doing there at Forsyth Tech. So thank you. Before we go to our last speaker, I just want to remind everybody, if you have a question for any of our speakers, please add those into the Q&A, which is at the bottom of your screen. So for our final speaker, I want to welcome Shannon McKeen. With over 25 years of experience in various industries and sectors, Shannon is a data and analytics expert who helps organizations and individuals leverage data for innovation and growth. As a professor of the practice and the executive director of the Center for Analytics Impact at Wake Forest University School of Business, he teaches and leads data and analytics initiatives that create positive impact across disciplines and sectors. Shannon has a strong academic foundation and a lifelong passion for learning and teaching. With an MBA from the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth and a BA in computer science from Williams College, he is also a HubSpot certified inbound marketer and frequent speaker and writer on topics related to data, analytics, and experiential learning. His mission is to advance data literacy and analytics skills among students, faculty, and industry partners, and to empower them to make data-driven decisions and actions. Welcome, Shannon.
Thank you, Claudia, and thanks to Jay and Joe for setting the bar so high. Now I have to go ahead and follow that. Let me get my setup here. Claudia, can you see that screen? Is that good to go? Okay, great. Thank you. So as Claudia mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit about using AI maybe for you as individuals. I think Joe set it up really well, and I like what Jay had to say about AR and VR. We're actually doing some of that in the classroom here. But I'm going to mainly talk about generative AI. And I guess to start, I want to just make the point that it's not new. It's been around for a long time. and this may just be a nod to my alma mater at Dartmouth, but back in 1956, people started talking about AI. It's really exploded onto the scene for us as lay people in the last 2 years. And I think Joe did a great job of laying out the different tools that are out there. I too am a big fan of Claude. That's kind of my go-to model, and Perplexity too. So I think Joe's right, because he and I agree on that. What I want to talk generally about is what I see here at the business school, people I talk to in industry, and students, and that is just, how do I use it? What do I do with it? What are the powers of generative AI, or what are the benefits? Is it's a general purpose technology, so you can use it for so many different things. But the challenge is you don't really know where to start. When I got my first iPhone, I knew what to do with it. I used it as a phone. And when I got comfortable with using it as a phone, I started using it as a means of texting and a means of watching videos. And so I kind of expanded from there. There's no one kind of manual or instruction book for generative AI or for the tool that you may hear about. So not really sure where to start. And I think the slow adoption that we've seen historically from other general purpose technologies like electricity, cars, and computers is because it requires change. It requires infrastructure needs. There's sometimes a skill gap, there's uncertainty, and it requires cultural change. My advice to any organization I talk to is that if you start at the individual level, people get comfortable with it, assuming that the company has the right policies and guidelines around privacy. There are some downsides to generative AI. There was a question in the chat. I'm not going to talk so much about that today, but certainly I could have a conversation about that going forward. I'll mention it a little bit at the end. But the way to start is individuals start using it. And so you should just pick a tool, pick a use case, and practice as much as you can. What I tell people that I interact with is, here are some general use cases for generative AI that individuals here at the business school are using, or industry partners that I talk to. And I'm going to give you just a personal example of each of these 6 that might spark an interest or spark an idea. The point is, start using it. Totally agree with Joe's 10-hour guidelines. Until you've used it for 10 hours, you probably don't have enough appreciation of what it can really do. And people bounce, like Joe said, and it can be a frustrating experience. But if you can actually stick with it, it doesn't have to be 10 hours in one sitting, 10 hours over a week or a month, and I think you'll get more comfortable with it. So starting with creating and editing content at the individual level. So my very first use case for generative AI was ChatGPT 3.5. And I'd heard about it, and I have 2 adult children. I love to drive them crazy with dad jokes. So I said, hey, give me 100, not really 8, I said, give me 100 dad jokes to annoy my children. And boom, I put 8 because I couldn't fit 100 on my screen, but I got 8, and some of them are pretty good. I've used them with my kids. Another example of creating and editing was, I was in a conversation with a colleague here about using AI, when to use it, how to use it, how to guide students to use it. And she had a very, I think, insightful comment, but it was a little verbose. And she said, her thoughts were that if you use AI to create more friction, it make things that require you to put in more effort, it is likely helping you learn. But if you're using it to make things easier, to allow you to decrease your effort, you're likely diminishing your opportunities to learn. So she's a really smart person, but that's kind of verbose. So I went to, I think in this case, Claude, and put in that sentence and said, give me some alternatives. And yeah, I said, if you're a copywriter, help me turn this phrase into a more concise statement. Please give me 4 alternatives. Boom, I got 4 alternatives. The one that I liked was, use AI to stretch your skills, not shrink your effort. So with not a lot of effort, I got a better quality product, in the sense that it was her original thoughts, and I've shared this with her, but it puts it in a context that I think students might react to. They're going to pay more attention to a 10-word statement than they would to a 25-word statement. The next category I have in mind is kind of brainstorming and pressure testing ideas. So another thing that we're struggling with here at the business school is how do we make sure students are using AI to help them think as opposed to thinking for them. And so anyone who's in education, or even if you're not in education, you're probably familiar with the term of a flipped classroom. And I had been toying with it in the past, but I decided this year I was going to really go all in on a flipped classroom because I think that's one way to ensure that students are learning or allow me to observe how students are learning. And so I used this prompt, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically I had an idea, told the AI what it was, an educational design expert, and I wanted it to help me identify some weaknesses and potential blind spots that I might not have considered as I got enamored with this particular idea. And lo and behold, this is what it spit out. So it's not perfect, but it's got some sources. It's got some topics or things I might want to go into. And so it's a great starting point to help me understand what I might be missing in my idea to go forward with the flipped classroom. And I think this works for any idea. I oftentimes use it when I'm in discussions with someone I disagree with. I put their arguments into ChatGPT and ask them, what a counter argument might be or discussion might be. Another particular use case is just summarizing. Now, this falls into the risk of maybe creating some taking advantage of some people's natural laziness. But if you've got a lot of things to read, it summarizes really well. This is an article that two colleagues and I wrote about using experiential learning courses in a business school. And if you're familiar with the acronym Too Long Didn't Read, this was early on. This was back in February of 2023. I took a PDF of the article that we wrote, and I put it into, I guess this would be ChatGPT, and I just used the prompt TLDR, and it spit out, there's probably 30 words there that kind of summarizes that argument. So what I've used it for, particularly for some long read articles, then, is it worth my time? This way I can get a summary of it, say, oh, this is really good, I'm going to spend the time on it, as opposed to articles that I might not. Translating, we have a lot of international students here at Wake, particularly in the analytics program. And one thing that I have I've learned is that in my conversations, I use a lot of idioms, and anyone who speaks a second language knows that idioms do not translate well. So the idea of curating my lectures for idioms and taking them out and perhaps coming up with something that would be more simple, straightforward in English. Notes in another language, sometimes you can take the notes that I've written, or lecture notes, and you can convert it into another language for someone to read if they're really struggling with English. And then HeyGen, which is a tool that takes your video of you, and all it needs is about 2 minutes of a video of you, and then it can project you speaking words that aren't in the video, and it looks like it also can be a different language. So a colleague had a 2-minute summary about experiential learning, and then gave it a prompt about using the power of liberal arts in a generative AI world, and asked it to produce the video of her speaking in Chinese. And if you didn't know her, it'd be hard pressed to tell that it was AI generated. It's kind of a deep fake. Another way to use it is as a personal learning assistant. So this is a picture of my son when he was 14. He built a forge. I knew at the outset that he was really going to be some kind of engineer, and he liked blowing things up. And lo and behold, fast forward 16 years, and he's getting a PhD in aerospace engineering. He's literally going to be a rocket scientist. I have no idea what his research topic is about. This is a page from one of his papers. So I put this paper into ChatGPT and said, okay, explain this to me like I'm a 10-year-old. And all of a sudden, I got a high-level concept of what he's doing. I could have a conversation with him. And I haven't told him this, but the first 12 times he tried to explain to me his dissertation, I didn't understand it. After doing this, he tried to explain it again, and I asked some follow-up questions. And he's like, you get it. You understand it. No, AI understood it. He just translated it in terms that I could make sense of. Creating and debugging code, I think, is a great way to use it. If you are not a programmer, I think Joe may have mentioned this. You can use Claude to write language for you in Python to do something done in Python. And so that's very helpful. We're actually wondering how much we have to train or teach people computer programming languages, because it may become something that AI can do very well for us. I had this problem recently where I had an Excel spreadsheet with all the student teams meeting that I was going to have. I had to break them out in the cadence. I wondered how to put them into my calendar, and I wasn't going to do it one at a time. So I asked ChatGPT and gave me some HTML code, and I was able to upload it into Google Calendar in one full swoop. So that was a lot easier than doing one at a time. If you use slash commands or keyboard shortcuts, it's a great way if you're working with a new piece of software and you want a slash command that works in that software or keyboard shortcuts. You can certainly go look it up in the manual, but oftentimes you can ask generative intelligence AI. Personalized marketing content, we use this to help create tutors for students. We can use a GPT, which is kind of like an agent using ChatGPT, and we can provide the lecture slides, the materials that the faculty have created, and create an individual tutor that the students can access at 2 in the morning if they're struggling with a particular piece of the content that's being discovered. So again, I would pick one. If one of these doesn't work, find something and make generative AI your first go-to to start thinking about that particular task. So if you have to do a lot of editing, go to AI the next 12 times you have to edit something to get help. And you'll start to see the power, and you might see the potential that it could work for you. I didn't get a chance to talk about it, kind of like Joe. Oftentimes when I give these talks, they're more than an hour. But there are risks, and some of the risks have been surfaced, and we spent a lot of time talking to our students about making sure that what they're going to put into ChatGPT belongs in ChatGPT, to be very wary of hallucinations, because despite all the efforts for the companies to correct or make sure that they're limiting the hallucinations, it still happens. And if you're working with AI, a topic you're very familiar with, then you can identify the hallucinations. But if you're new to a topic, it'll get right by you and you'll start using it because it sounds so convincing. There are a number of privacy and IP issues that we mentioned. Those models take up a lot of energy and a lot of computing power, and that's not really good for the environment. So there's a risk we have to worry about. And it can make us dumber. There are certain, the example I use is my kids are 30 and 28, and they can't read a map because they've become so dependent on GPS and Google Maps and Waze. And so there's a risk there that could take the same thing could happen in critical thinking. So we at the school are thinking carefully about how do we protect against that? How do we make sure we're providing students with the benefits of AI? So we are increasing their skills, but we're protecting against them shrinking their effort. So I'll close, I guess, with this, some thoughts on being successful with AI. Use it, make it a habit, iterate, don't bounce, like Joe said. Beware of AI washing. A lot of companies I work with 2 years ago, they were saying something about all the machine learning algorithms and all the analytics they had, and now everything's AI. Be alert for integrations. You're using AI, you didn't realize it, between Excel and Word and email. Find someone to follow and be curious. It's a journey, not a destination. Thank you.
Shannon, thank you so very much for that presentation. Lots of different ways for folks to use AI in their tasks, in their daily life. Thank you also to Joe and Jay and Konrad for your takes and how you are using AI in your particular industries. We're going to open up right now for questions from our audience, and I'm going to go back to some of the ones that came in at the very beginning. Carrie asks, how much are we discussing the ramification and concerns that AI tools uncover, such as plagiarism, lack of critical thinking, and widening the digital divide, despite their powerful benefits for professionals and students. And any of you, any of our panelists are welcome to answer that question.
I'll start. Jay may have a point. Jay, do you have a point of view? Go ahead. Okay, so yeah, it's a huge risk. We haven't yet figured out the answer. Somewhat tongue in cheek, some faculty said, "I'm going back to blue books." Those of you remember writing out your exams in blue books, and so it's a problem. There's not an answer yet. I will say a lot of the tools that are advertised that can determine whether or not someone's used generative AI on that, they don't really work as well. So you really can't catch cheating with technology, at least not right now. A friend of mine who teaches in the communications department here took one of his papers that he wrote 20 years ago into one of these tools, and it came back and it said there's a 66% chance that that paper was written by AI. Well, clearly not, because it was written 20 years ago. And so it's an outstanding issue. And Carrie, if you've got any thoughts, love to hear this.
One thing, go ahead.
No, go
Konrad.
ahead, Joe. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say one thing. So I've got kids. It's so interesting to see how schools are treating AI. And so I've got one in college, I've got one in high school, and I've got one in grade school. So it's so interesting to see how it's treated at every level. One of the things Shannon had in his presentation was the concept of a flipped classroom, which feels like it could be an interesting solve with the emergence of AI. We're used to being lectured in the class and then we go home to do our work. If you flip that so that you go home and you watch a virtual seminar of the teacher going through the concepts, and then when you go into the classroom is when you actually do the work, that's one solve. Another thing that I had, my 8th grade son came up to me one night and said, "Dad, what's a negative exponent?" And I'm an English major. I was like, I have no idea. So I would use ChatGPT. I looked it up, and then I built a custom GPT that allowed him. And I said, so he can take a picture of any problem. It'll examine the problem, determine how hard the problem is, and then substitute the values. So it's not cheating, but it'll create like a representation of the exact same kind of problem and walk him through that. And when I showed that to one of his teachers, the teacher said, well, now you're better at my job than I am. What am I supposed to do? And I said, you got to find that I think what AI allows everybody to do is operate at their highest level of contribution. And for me, a teacher teaching my kids that 2 times 3 equals 6 is not that highest order of contribution. And so we all are going to have to level up and figure out different ways to add value to our professions. And this has happened throughout history. AI just happens to be the latest generation that's getting people really worried.
Yeah, and I was just going to chime in. All of that is 100%. So from an education standpoint, I know here at Forsyth Tech, we've put an AI task force into place some time ago because we know students are going to use AI, and we don't want faculty and staff to be scared of that. We want them to understand the tools and understand how AI can make things better. But a lot of it is just getting the understanding of what those AI systems are, how they're used, how they're beneficial also to faculty and staff. Because at the end of the day, as the industry moves forward, as education moves forward, the workforce moves forward, we know AI is going to be more integrated into the workforce. So from us, and I'm assuming most educational facilities, you have to be on board. You have to learn what those AI systems are and be able to work with students, faculty, and staff to make sure that they're actually being educated and trained in a way that 5 or 10 years from now, because AI is evolving every day, that they have the means to be successful.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Another one of the questions that has come into the chat, we actually, Jay did address this over in the chat function, but in the question and answer, it says, Scott had a big question about how the umbrella term mental illness plays out in the law enforcement VR system. What sort of training does AI receive to that end, and how granular are the settings? There's a difference between someone having a psychotic break, and someone who is manic or depressive. And Jay kind of responded over in the chat for those of you who didn't see that the instructors are able to put in inputs based off of what the outcomes are to be. But I don't know if Jay, you want to expound upon that for everyone here right now, what that looks like.
Yeah, so each scenario that we ask the system to build something, and if it's centered around maybe a mental illness challenge, we're asking for very specific outputs, like what do we want the system to kind of build and necessarily do? How, and the question you ask is like, how does the AI, how do they know necessarily what that piece is? So there are, and I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not any of those kind of pieces that can really speak and, at a high level of all of the different facets around a mental illness crisis in that sense. The system's not really designed to necessarily pick apart those specific pieces, a psychotic episode to something other different. What it's trying to do is get to a point where the person that you're dealing with in the virtual world is having some sort of mental illness piece. And that's an umbrella term because they're just the system's trying to differentiate, a crime, for lack of a better word, somebody, robbing a bank, and how you're going to interact with that particular person to somebody that you just meet on the street. And, immediately you can tell that, something's not right, or you're trying to determine, is it a mental illness? Are they intoxicated? Are there drugs involved? Those kind of pieces in there. So again, the system's not trying to be a granular down to give a diagnosis, for lack of better words, like this is what this person has. It's really just designed to put that person in a high stress situation and help them figure out, how do I talk to this person and get that situation to a lower stress.
I want to, at this time, I actually want to say we've had some great conversations in our chat about the possibility of having more experience with that virtual reality training that's being offered there at Forsyth Tech. I know that some of our flagship committees may be possibly using that as an offering for our upcoming class members, so that's great to see. Additionally, we are going to offer an alumni opportunity for that experience, and Jay has so kindly offered that for alumni on October the 9th. So if you are an alum of LWS, that is going to be a special offering that'll come out in our alumni newsletter, and you'll see some things there. You'll see ways to sign up. It is a very limited number of people who can sign up for that opportunity. So just wanted to bring that about right now. Thank you so much. The last question I see in the chat right now is, what do we think about ethical issues surrounding AI? What are ways that we can make sure that individuals and organizations use AI tools responsibly?
That'd be another 2-hour conversation. It is so fraught with peril and possibility that it's tough to. I'll tell you the most interesting thing I've heard. I was sitting on a panel on a discussion of AI, and one person said something that I thought was interesting and a little bit horrifying, but he essentially thought that AI was going to be the end of truth. There is going to be no more identifiable truth, and we're so used to having truth at our fingertips. We Google it and we get the true result. And so he kind of thought that we were going to go back to this idea of relative truth. So back when we were cavemen, if a story made it from fireside A to fireside B to fireside D, then there was relative truth to that story. And that's kind of that's a possibility that may happen, which is there is going to be no more arbiter of actual truth. And so we might revert back to a concept of relative truth, which I thought was interesting.
Totally agree with Joe. I mean, that's a lot of people smarter than I are trying to think about that, and we're not going to have an answer in the near term. I do believe that it's changing so quickly that I'm not sure trying to control it or regulate it's going to work. It's going to take more discussion and dialogue, and hopefully although one of the risks of AI is it may diminish human connection. But I think if there's greater human connection, then you still can trust individuals when you see them face to face. So maybe it'll bring back more face to face interchange. I don't know.
Yeah, and from an ethical standpoint, 100% Joe, and that was kind of the part that, from educational standpoint is always comes up is, is it your own work? Is it ethical in those kind of pieces? And you brought up earlier, it might have been you or Shannon, that, originally there was systems or programs that you could run a paper through and it says, hey, this is this. But as we've seen, those are not as reliable as once thought, for lack of better words. So still a lot of work, again, I think Shannon said lot smarter people are trying to grasp those pieces there. But it is something that we are working on specifically to try to make sure that from an education standpoint, it is ethical, that students are learning, and it's not just something that is just strictly AI driven.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for joining us today and presenting on the topic. The AI is a big topic, as evidenced by the 3 local experts that we have in our community, who all spoke about various different ways AI is being used in ways that you may not have imagined. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Claudia, for moderating the conversation. Claudia is our Alumni Council Educator Committee Chair, and AI as a topic was something near and dear to her heart. So thank you so very much for helping to bring these panelists to us today. I want to make note for everyone who is on the webinar this afternoon. We had some 107 people actually register to learn about AI and all of the different ways that it is being used. Not all of those people were able to join us this afternoon. So they will actually receive a recording of this conversation and be able to reference it as well. Additionally, once this is, we finish the recording, we post it to our YouTube channel for later consumption. So please feel free to share that with those who were not able to join us live or did not register for the webinar ahead of time. Again, our sincere thanks to our panelists for their time today and for sharing their thoughts around AI and its integration in our day-to-day lives. If you're an alum of LWS, we do want you to note that we are signing people up for our opening retreat welcome line. Jared will put that registration into the chat here shortly. Please use that link to register for this very special event that we have every year. Just a reminder that LWS is a nonprofit organization that relies very heavily on the support of individual donors and corporate sponsors to provide the array of programming that we do. If you enjoyed what was offered today, please make a contribution to the organization on our website by clicking the donate link now that you can find in the chat. Thank you, all of you, for caring about our community and joining us today for this important conversation. We hope to see you again. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.